Welcome to this week's episode of The Wrap. Kyle, new digs. I know normally we'd start off with what's going on this week, but I would be remiss if I didn't call out. The office looks great, dude.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're doing transformation in our clients and transformation of our office. It's what we do.
Yeah, perfect. I love the sign. And where you're standing right now is a little bit better than before because right behind you, you've got this giant paddle,
Yeah, there
which
you go.
really makes me feel insecure compared to this little tiny one I have over here. What's the story behind this thing? This thing's like 6 feet tall.
Yeah, so this is so they're obviously military paddles from our time. It was a tradition. Now some of this is this folklore, right? As the generations have gone on, the story gets a little bit more and more
Mm.
morphed. But the idea of the paddle was the original Marine Raider days, which were these amphibious boat teams, and when you checked into the unit, you were given equipment, and one of the things that you were given as part of your essential equipment was a paddle, and that paddle went everywhere with you, especially as like a new guy, right? So you went everywhere, whether you're going to eat, sleep, whatever, you had your paddle with you, and then when you left the unit, your buddies would steal that paddle, and then they would decorate it in some way, or do stuff with it so that it symbolized your time with the unit. It reflected your contributions or your deployments or different parts of your service, and then presented back to you at a part. It's called a paddle party or a ceremony. Um, and when you were a junior guy, so you start off on the boat team, you start towards the front of the boat, and the paddle that you're given in that position is smaller. And then as you become more and more senior within a unit, you would move further and further back in the boat, getting a larger and larger paddle. So that's part of the significance. Now, usually when we give paddles to our sister and brother branches, Army and other likes, we typically give them smaller paddles.
Yeah, here we go. That's what happened here. I see. I guess it's a good thing you left when you did. If it was any taller, you couldn't fit it in the room.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. What is it wrapped with? Is it wrapped with det cord and shock tube back there? What do you got going on?
Yeah, so it's obviously got the 550 core, but I was a breacher, so it actually has the M81, and the blaster, an inert blasting cap. So it's
Nice.
got basically a firing system for an explosive.
That's
All of
awesome.
it's inert. It's all just like training stuff. I don't have real stuff on my wall, but it's to symbolize that part of my career, which was a breacher.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, the office looks great, man.
Thank you.
I'm pretty happy with mine, other than it's a little messy. But you've been inspiring me. I may have to do something over here. But cool stuff, man. Well, I guess like getting into it. Obviously, everything we just talked about had nothing to do with technology. We should probably talk about some technology at some point.
There we go.
Um, I know what we've been kicking around is we've been talking about this kind of technology value creation partner, right? Which is our take on our business model and our value proposition and kind of everything all wrapped into one. And, we were talking about it even before we hit record. And obviously, a lot has been changing for us recently. I think the thing that's not changing is that, right? In this positioning and where we think not only can we be successful in, our go to market, but also where we know we provide a lot of, value, and the feedback we get to our clients is like this kind of overarching, you know, umbrella of technology value creation, and all the various practices we have and the things we do and the expertise we bring lives underneath that. We were kicking that around beforehand, and you know, kind of some of the internal conversation is like, well, you know, do we have that right? Do we have that messaging right? And I think every time we come back around, it's like a resounding yes. The thing that's interesting and probably worthwhile to talk about is like how we actually came to get there, because it wasn't like we sat around in some marketing workshop and came up with this. It was years of iteration and engagement with clients, and figuring out what worked, figuring out what didn't work, hiring to build that capacity, building partnerships to build that capacity. Like it's been a long road to get to that and an ability to execute on it. So I think maybe we could just chop it up a little bit on kind of how we came to be here and arrive at that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, as you mentioned, there was a triangulation of things, right? There was what we saw in the market, what our clients were telling us. I think there was an additional part, which was us as a culture and as a company. Like, what did we? Because I mean, there's a world of abundance out there, right? Like, you could pick a bunch of different things to land on and probably still be successful. But there was also a part of, what did we want to be involved in? What did we, what kind of stuff did we want to bring to our clients in the market? So that's another interesting dynamic of how we end up landing where we did.
Yeah, it's interesting when you just said that, and I hadn't ever thought about it in these terms before, literally until you just said that. You familiar with the concept of ikigai? You ever heard of it?
Uh-uh.
It's a Japanese concept for like finding your it's not applied in a business context. Typically it's more in like a personal context, but it's this concept of, if you imagine a Venn diagram, four circles. One of them is what you love, one is what you're good at, one is what the world needs, and then one is what you can be paid for, right? And in that perfect overlap there in the middle is ikigai. It's spelled Ikigai. But it's interesting that you bring it up that way, because it really is kind of where we ended up at, because there were projects that we were doing that we didn't necessarily love. Right? So we kind of, but I think the thing that we didn't love about them was, they were maybe needed or necessary in a client, but they weren't necessarily something that like the client was fired up about and like, hey, this is very valuable to us. Right. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how we ended up in this value creation space. And then what the world needs, obviously, like we're navigating places that are typically complex to navigate. Even as simple as some of the, like last week we were talking about networking, right? Like those are still challenging places, and like the world does need help on both sides. Like the supplier needs people like us, and the clients need people like us, and so that's been great. And then we're good at it. We built it over 23 years. Our time here 7, but the company's been doing it for 23 years. And then obviously what we can be paid for. So it's interesting. I've never actually thought about it in those terms, um, until you were. But it's almost looking at it from a company's perspective on this concept of ikigai, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we did that maybe in a different way, right? We adopted the EOS framework, so the operating system, entrepreneur operating system, and part of that was looking at, you know, what is our purpose, what's our kind of passion in that, what can we bring to the market, what's our unique position and our niche. So that's I think, yeah, an interesting way to triangulate to get to what's in that kind of center overlap.
Yeah, the other piece we've worked a lot on, not just in like our outward positioning, but also in our service delivery, is this concept of being persistent. There was a time years ago we would come in, we would do a project with a client. It would be valuable to the client, but we would move on, right? We would go to the next project, go to the next project, go to the next project. We started looking at it and we were like, well, when we deliver on these projects, like we learn about the company strategy, we learn about how they make decisions, we learn about all these adjacent systems and technologies. And, it was something that was obviously valuable to us to have, but it was also valuable to our client that we had it, but then we were leaving with it, right? We were
Yeah,
we were leaving with it. And sometimes we actually had more information than the clients did, especially if they had turnover, at their executive levels. And so, it was something where we started looking at, where we're like, we have to really reshape how we're delivering this a little bit so that we can be persistent, so that we can be constant. And now, like, that's worked out incredibly well, where we have clients that we're maintaining for years and years and just going next project to next project to next project. But we have that kind of shared learning,
yeah.
which has been
One,
cool.
it's a unique position for us that I think presents a unique value to the client, right? Which is different than how they may interact with traditional, on the vendor or supplier side, right? where if they were to make that, because that's an investment from the client to give that type of information and
Hmm.
open up in that way, have conversations, exchange data. And if you give that to a supplier, well, that supplier has natural limitations, right? They have natural limitations in the product offering that they sit in, or even just the technology stack or portion of the stack that they sit in. That for us is less applicable, right? That
Yeah.
we're agnostic in from the different vendors, so we're not tied to a particular widget. Um, and we're not tied to oh well, we are a voice provider so we can only do voice, right? We can take this across a number of different technology stacks, but still take the lessons learned from one project and apply it to others, as far as like you said, some of the call it, I don't know if you'd say intangibles, but more of the how does this company make decisions? How do they think about their business, and what are some of their processes? So it's much as a qualitative as it is quantitative type relationship that you're gathering in order to bring value back to them. It's like, hey, I know the way that you guys like to do this or think about this. I'm already one step ahead, and I'm going to present the data in that way. I'm going to adopt this way that we do this thing together. Uh, that's, I think, a breath of fresh air to clients, right? Because they're not the. We always give this example of an old school call center, right? Where you as a customer, you call into a call center and you explain your problem or you explain what you're trying to do, and they're like, all right, hey, let me transfer you. And the person's like, hey, okay, who are you and what do you need? And you're like, all right, let me explain myself again. They're like, oh, I need to get this person. And they transfer you, and you kind of end up in that. Um, Somewhat similar, I think, in maybe vendors are going from project to project versus
Yeah.
having a consultant that has continuity at the strategic level, right? With how we pair with clients, that can bring that level of knowledge into specific projects within a greater program.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want us to end up too much kind of just aggrandizing what we do, because I feel like that would be maybe not the most interesting content, but it's it's been a road to get here. There was a lot of lessons along the way for us to figure out, like, hey, like those pieces are valuable. We can bring them back. We can use them in a way that enables us to deliver something better while also being like more and more and more impactful, which has been like, I mean, it's been a exciting kind of journey to do that. So we could probably stop there for now. I know you and I could talk about this all day because
Yeah,
like I said, there's been a lot of lessons learned along the way, right? Like, about what worked versus what didn't, and how to really dial this in. But we've made it to a really great spot around it, and you know, I'm very happy with kind of this way we framed up what we do and the way we framed up, not only framing up what we do, but aligning the engagement methodology throughout, and how we're actually engaging with our clients to be in alignment with that. This concept of, technology value creation partner, in my opinion, this is the way. Like this is the way that it, can and should be done, um, you know, for for the future. So, um, I think we'll probably take a quick break here, and we'll come back with an additional segment. Welcome back to the final segment of today's show, where we talk about. You don't like that, Josh? That was the most. That was the most radio host I've ever been. All right, Kyle. We are talking about the kind of our segment here on how to GAI today. Um, you and I have both, really been using it pretty heavily lately.
yep,
And I would say, for context, we both of us are really mostly living in Chat GPT, primarily what we're using. Using some of the newer models, but um, I guess where should we start? I know you've been using. I think you were writing some policy recently. Like, how have you been using it?
yeah. Well, and I think one of the interesting things that we wanted to talk about was maybe call it lessons learned or tricks in prompt engineering. and things that we've picked up along the way uh, in how we're using it. So I think it was, either you or Josh had sent an article, and one of the interesting things that it had said was to leverage the model for ideas versus answers. Kind of
Mm.
being like a thought partner, which I thought was um, an interesting piece. So I've this week have been trying to incorporate some of that. Instead of saying, um, "Hey, give me the answer to this," or "Write this thing," it's, "Hey, how should I think about this?" Or, if you're this type of person, what's your approach? Like getting it
Yeah.
to give me ideas versus answers, which has been an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, I've been doing the same, and I guess I think it important too. Like, there's so many things you can talk about with AI, right? And in my opinion, a good place to start is with something like a Chat GPT or a Claude, and just working on prompts and using it as this thought partner, right? Because like, yes, you can go build something, you can find a use case inside your business, you can do all those things, but like, if you just even start with some of this, which is basic and foundational, and figure out the term I've been using internally is kind of like being AI literate, right? But it's like, how do I use this thing as a thought partner? I've been using it in a similar way to what you're talking about. I found like a couple kind of, call them hacks or whatever, but um, telling it who it is. So the other day I was working on some things around strategy. I told it it was going to be a strategy consultant, right? So hey, you're going to be a strategy consultant. Kind of framed up what it was I wanted to work on, and then I did another one on the end of it and said, I want you to lead this, right? Instead of me having to be like, okay, well, like it needs to know this, this, and this. I said, hey, like I framed it up and then said you to lead it, and said, great. Like here's some of the things that I would want to discover or learn first. Can you answer these for me? And that was actually like that was pretty good, because on the other end of that, I was able to kind of come out with a framework, because that's what I was asking for, about how to approach a problem I was dealing with, which was like super helpful.
Yeah.
Saved me a lot of time. A lot of time. My previous would have been like, either I would have dug into one of these books up here for a framework, right? Or I would have gone and started searching and ended up, Googling for 30 minutes or an hour to find the framework that I wanted to use, and then sat down and had to like research each of them. Where now it's like you can get the framework, you've got it in context, you can ask it to expand on an area, or say, I'm struggling to understand that one. Can you tell me more about it? Like, it's been very useful in that way.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. It's like, to your point, being literate, right? Um, it's the next, I don't know what you would call it, like the Google generation, right? Like, prior to that, when people had to learn, like, well, how do you even prompt Google to give you back the thing that you need, right? Well, it's this, but amplified or exponential.
Yeah.
And what I found, when I first started using it, I would ask it to do something. Um, hey, build me whatever policy, and it wouldn't necessarily build the policy. It would say, like, here's 10 bullet points, or an outline for it. And I'd be like, this isn't what I want. Like,
You were a little grump on it early on.
yeah, and so getting used to, like, how do you use it to then get the stuff you want, right? And so, instead, that's where it started. Was, how should I frame this, right? What's the outline, of this document that I should be putting together for a policy or something? And they would give you those 10 bullet points and say, okay, well, let's walk through, and to your point, kind of, hey, lead the conversation, or walk me through these 10, and what are the things that I need to answer in order for us to get a completed version of each one of these sections. And so that's what I was using it, this week on, where then it went section by section, and it would say, okay, well, what's your organization's tolerance for this, or what's your organization's position on that? And it would walk me through a handful of questions that I would answer, and then it would spit back the more completed section. And we went section by section, and then I said, okay, now take everything that we've done, format it, and spit it back to me in one coherent document.
Yeah.
And what was 30 to 45 minute process, wrote a 10 to 12 page policy document that would have otherwise probably taken a day.
Yeah.
At
Yep.
least, thinking about the research and thinking about the how to write it, or things in that nature. Took it down to a 30 to 45 minute process.
Yeah, it's interesting though. It's like the whole concept, oh, AI is coming for your job or something like that. Like the things it doesn't know, right? Like it doesn't understand the culture of our organization. It doesn't understand the risk tolerance. Like it doesn't understand any of those pieces, right? And so that space for it as a thought partner is, I think, a great space near term. One final little thing. I don't even think I've told you about this on a way I've been using it. What I'll do is I'll open it up on my phone so I mean, obviously you can talk to it on your computer too, but usually I'm in kind of like more complex conversations, right? So it may throw me back something that's kind of long, like, and it's reading it, and I can't listen to that, especially like sometimes I'll have tables in it or different stuff, right? But I open it up on my phone so I can be prompting it and literally having a conversation with it, like it's sitting in the room, and then the prompts are coming up on my screen so that I can actually read them and pull them in, which is much harder to do than if you're like asking it for a table or something like that. Like you need to be able to see it. But it's been a pretty good little workflow too, which also, just as an aside, is an amazing like technology that it can so quickly show up on both endpoints, like and like the transcription so like accurate. Like it's been a good way to use it. It's kind of just a cool aside, but
It's
all right, I think
one
that's
one step closer to, I think we were talking about the, like the Tony Stark type stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where you're sitting there talking to an AI, and then I know a number of episodes ago we talked about like the Apple Vision Pro, where you're grabbing stuff out of virtual space and like moving it around.
yeah.
It really does feel like we're getting to, at least in some of these technologies, to where um, they're performing in a way that was like, wow, that was something as in a movie, that seemed 100 years away from us.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a goal because I'm not setting any time bounds around this, and it's actually not like that important to me. I just think it would be kind of cool. So if I randomly end up with some time, I'll see if I can program it, but actually want to build a GPT and invite it into the pod, and
Mm,
the three of us, me, you, and I'll call him Bob, have a conversation, which would be pretty interesting. So I don't have to work on that. I may at some point work on that, which would be kind of cool.
God.
I'll have to tell him like, hey, you're really smart. You just can't be smarter than me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's that whole coming for our job thing. They'll make them better. They'll make them better at podcasting than us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, cool, man. Well, that's a wrap for this week, and I hope you enjoyed.